put it on slideshow mode. All right, so today we're gonna look a little bit at this book. I don't know how many of you have read it. It's now in English, which is really a blessing. And we're just gonna look at chapter 1, which is also a nice introduction into art. It is entitled, and so it's written by Denis, and he also helps to flesh out his point of view and theories on the subject with the help of certain spirits. And one of the main spirits he's actually using is called the esthete, which means, you guys understand it? It's French. It's esthete meaning aesthetics, right? It's somebody who is into aesthetics, into the arts, and that's the name of that entity. And there is certain sections in the book that are just from that spirit and some others. But again, we're just going to focus on chapter 1, okay? And please always say what is on your mind, ask questions, and add perspectives so that it's not just a boring monologue. So the book starts off, so the title of the chapter is Architecture and Painting. However, he talks quite a bit of music in this chapter, so we'll see. So first of all, he says, beauty is one of the divine attributes. So right here, we see the place of beauty. The first time I read this, it blew me away. It made total sense, but I had never thought of beauty as being a divine attribute per se. He also says that God has put in all beings and all things this mysterious charm which attracts us, seduces us, captivates us, and fills our souls with admiration, sometimes with enthusiasm. And I'm sure we can attest to that. Of course, our sense of beauty is quite often personal, but as we learn throughout the book, it's very much related to the level of our soul development. Art, he continues to say, is the search, the study, the manifestation of that eternal beauty, of which we perceive only a reflection down below. So this is very humbling for us because we instantly learn that, yes, we are all striving for beauty. Beauty is a divine attribute. However, in the arts here down below on this planet, it is only a reflection of the actual beauty that reigns in the beyond. And of course, in the beyond, depending on the different level of worlds the spirit resides in. As the spirit arises, ascends more and more to God, the level of beauty becomes ever so more beautiful, so to speak. Then he says, to see beauty in all its splendor, in all its power, one needs to gradually go up towards its emanating source, which is God, which is a difficult task for most of us because we know to ascend to God is a daily struggle. We also know from Emmanuel that it takes 2 wings to strengthen equally. One is the wing of knowledge, and the other one is the wing of service, of love, of charity. So we're only picking out certain aspects of this chapter. We're by no means reading the whole chapter, so you're really invited to pick it up and flesh it out with the rest. So then he says, beauty is, did we go? Hold on just a second. Just got to go back one more moment. Yeah, here. So the esthete is adding to this. The esthete says, art is of divine essence. It is a manifestation of the thought of God. So art is the manifestation of the thought of God, a radiation of the brain and the heart of God transmitted in the artistic form. So it gives us a glimpse of where also art resides in us. The brain and the heart, they need to be and are both engaged in the finding, the search for, and expression of art. So the essential role of art for us is to express life in all its power through grace and beauty. Isn't it beautiful? All its power. It's expressing life's all power. So it's not just a part of the power, it's actually the essential, it's at the core of life. Art is to express life in all its power. And how do we do it? Through grace and beauty. So our striving for beauty, our striving for harmony, our desire to be surrounded visually by beauty, but also, how do you say, from the hearing perspective, I can't think of the Latin word right now, of beauty, and the word, right? Poetry is an expression of beauty. So in all of our different forms, we can and do express beauty. And this striving is the vehicle for us and the desire of ours to come closer to God. The aesthete further adds, so this is from on high, on earth, art does not amount to much, and you seem satisfied with it. Again, very humbling. Does not minimize art because, you know, in all the aspects on earth, we are striving for more. We are where we're at. And that's part of self-love, to not put ourselves down. But, you know, to stay humble is always good, right? So yet art exists in all domains, again, in all domains, in the domain of thought, in the domain of sculpture, in the domain of music, and the list goes on. It is in the latter, namely music, that art manifests itself best and becomes accessible to a larger number of brains. So this is really important, right? So there is within itself, in the realm of art, according to the aesthete, who is a spirit from on higher, there is a little bit of a hierarchy, and he will explain later why it is that music is the manifestation of art in its most quintessential form. And it makes art more accessible to a larger number of brains. So music is really at the core of it. Then Leon Denis continues to say, so all of these, I want to just parentheses, I want to add that every single sentence in this PowerPoint is a quotation, even though I may not always put a quotation mark there, which would have been an oversight. Just wanted to say none of it is my own words. Okay, so it's all from this chapter. So then Leon Denis says, materialism under its withering breath sterilized art. So what does he mean by it? He said art crawled into the basement of realism without being able to rise to the peaks of ideal beauty. Spiritism gives the latter a new impetus, a more lively impulsion towards the heights, where it can find the fruitful source of inspirations and the sublimity of genius. So overall, art has been flattened by materialism. And it's easy to understand because materialism excludes the spiritual realm, right? And right there, we know there's a cap on the experience. If we just get stuck on matter, we don't see the bigger picture. So, but Spiritism, of course, because we know that we're continuously in touch with the spirit world, thanks to we're using Spiritism as a vehicle, automatically our scope is more elevated, and to understand art on a deeper level and to really feel it and to incorporate it more into our lives becomes consequently easier. So thank you, Spiritism, once again, right? So then he says, the essential purpose of art is the quest for and the realization of beauty. So the purpose of art is our desire to find beauty and to realize it, to manifest it, to create it in our lives. It is at the same time the search for God, since God is the first source and the perfect realization of physical and moral beauty. And there is another aspect, moral beauty, right? That's a form of art too. So this is really beautiful, right? So we are continuously striving for beauty. We can probably attest that in our own lives if we look at it. And if we, observe ourselves. And exactly that striving is our desire to come closer to God. Why? God? Because it's the first source of all things, right? We know the definition, what is God? First question in the Spirit's book. And it's the perfect realization of physical and moral beauty. God is, and that's our striving via beauty towards God. The more refined and fine-tuned and elevated intelligence becomes, the more it is imbued with the idea of beauty. So the more we fine-tune our intelligence, the more we ascend, the more we're capable of creating and perceiving beauty. The essential objective of evolution will therefore be the search for and the conquest of beauty, in order to realize it, beauty, in ourselves and in its works, in God's works. So by us ascending, perfecting ourselves through all the many reincarnations that we are experiencing, we will always be striving for more beauty and will be able to experience and manifest more beauty. Okay, just a second. We realize the necessity of successive existences, Denis says, as a means of acquiring, through continuous and gradual efforts, an ever more precise sense of good and beauty, right? And Spiritism helps us so beautifully to understand that it's through reincarnation that we get there. Effort and repetition, effort and repetition. Little by little, as the soul reaches new stages, the spirit acquires the dignity of an artist. So little by little, we're reaching the point of an artist. First, it's the search for beauty, but eventually we will become an artist. So that's like the next step. Higher still, so what's the next step after an artist? Higher still, the spirit will open up to the vast and deep conceptions, which are the privilege of the genius. Finally, becoming able to realize the supreme law of ideal beauty. So the striving is living in all of us. And the more we strive and the more incarnations we have, we eventually will become an artist. And then after being an artist, the next level where we will be even more in touch with the ideal beauty that reigns more on the spirit side. As we learned, it's a little more flattened here on this side, as a result of becoming a genius. And we see so many genius people on this planet already, right? So we kind of see it's there through many lifetimes, there's this intense search for God, for beauty. On Earth, artists are not all inspired by this higher ideal. Most of them limit themselves to imitating what they call nature, without realizing that it is only one aspect of the divine work. But on the spiritual plane, art takes on forms that are both more subtle and more magnificent, and that are more illuminated with divine reflections. So again, on the spirit side, there's a little bit more going on. Consulting our spirit guides. So it is very important to us, Denis says, to consult with our spirit guides in order to collect and summarize their teachings. On the plane where they live, namely on the spirit plane, the sources of inspiration are more abundant, with an ampler field of action for there, on the spirit side, the thought, the will, and the supreme power assert themselves and radiate more intensely. So on the spirit side, once we are in spirit form, we release our physical form, we will be more in touch with the thought, the will, and the supreme power because they radiate more intensely. It's obvious, right? This dense physical form is a buffer. It keeps us a little bit more in the fog. And then, of course, when we do express art, we have to work with the elements, which are very dense, right? And right there, it becomes much more calcified, much more difficult. It's in the perceptions, on the perception side, but also on the expression side. It is harder here, more flattened. Okay, let's see. So on Earth, every spirit is not only, hold on. Okay, so every spirit, once emanated from God, is not only in possession of a spark of divine intelligence. So we're not only a spark of the divine intelligence, we'll also share a fragment of creative power. That's why we always say we're co-creators of God, right? So it's not within this flame, we are also co-creators with God. So this is important because it helps us also to take personal responsibility, right? For our experiences. We know the law of cause and effect. We co-create our lives, our future with every thought, every word, every action is a seed in our garden of eternity. So this is echoed. His sentiment that Leon Denis brings to us here is echoed, of course, by the spirits on high in the Spirits book, question 76. Because in question 76, Allan Kardec is wondering, how can we define a spirit? And what is the answer? The answer is tantamount to what we're reading here. The spirit is the intelligent being of creation. It's the intelligent principle of the universe. So here, Leon Denis says the same thing. Every spirit is not only in possession of a spark of divine intelligence, right? It's that spark, but also a fragment of creative power. We also have a fragment of creative power. On earth, while veiled by flesh, the human intelligence and its power are lessened. Again, right? Keeping us humble. Makes sense, right? And yet, is it not marvelous to see what extent the genius of humans has been able to subjugate the brutal forces of matter, to overcome their resistance, their hostility, to enslave them to their needs and even to their fancies? So while we are struggling to really feel and express beauty, it is yet amazing to see the human genius on this planet. And we see it in all corners. If we really look, we recognize it. Why is it so amazing? As he says, it's because we are subjugated to the brutal forces of matter to express beauty, right? To carve something out of a coarse piece of rock takes a lot, right? While we are in the spirit world, just a thought creates it. But here it takes sometimes centuries, and he's going to talk about that in a minute, to create a piece of art, depending on which medium we're choosing. So it's the brutal forces of matters to overcome their resistance, their hostility, to enslave them to their needs and even to their fancies of the artist, to create art out of it. On the spiritual plane, this creative power asserts itself with all the more power. Why? Since the fluidic matter is much more subtle. There, all the difficulties of earthly work disappear. It suffices to keep a sustained mental action, to impart to fluids the forms that the spirit wishes to achieve and render durable. I say that again, Kiki, because it's so beautiful how the mentors guided us to study and have this beautiful lecture on the fluids last week, which now we're understanding another aspect of the fluidic life on the spirit side and the meaning of fluids, because it's even in the arts, it's an important aspect, right? It's an aspect that we may not have thought about last week, but it set the foundation for us to understand what Leon Denis just said now, and we're going to repeat it. There are all the difficulties of earthly work disappear on the spirit, in our spirit lives. Why? Because there it suffices to keep a sustained mental action, so thought, to impart to fluids the forms that the spirit wishes to achieve and render. All we need to do is create in our minds, think about a cathedral, and what happens? It gets created in the fluidic form. And here it might take on this side centuries to build. Kiki talked about it. It's chapter 14 in Genesis, the fluids, item 14. Allan Kardec clearly explains to us, spirits act upon the spiritual fluids, but they do not manipulate them like humans manipulate gases. Instead, the spirits use the help of thought and will. Thought and will are for spirits what hands are to humans. So of course, when we create pieces of art, let's say like in architecture, right? We use our thoughts and our will, and then it takes forever. And we have to work with those brutal forces to make those elements that are very coarse and dense into what we want them to make. Effortlessly on the other side, of course, depending on the spirit, on our soul evolution, thought and will creates the same beauty, forms of beauty, expressions of beauty in an instant. Are you guys still with me? Yeah, okay. All right, so we continue. So now he touches on music, which is very important. We mentioned it a little bit earlier. He says, on earth, music represents the living art, mobile and vibrant harmony, whereas architecture represents immobile and passive art in its imposing and rigid forms. So this is really a key sentence because it shows us and it teaches us, and the aesthete and the other spirits who channel information in this book repeat this information to us, that music, since it's the most fluidic form of art, is here on planet Earth expressing art in its more quintessential form. If we just think about the sentence before, that on the spirit side, all we have to think and the fluids get formed into what we want to create. Now, music is much closer to that concept than if we imagine a piece of rock and we want to create a cathedral out of it, or many rocks, right? Stone. So architecture represents the immobile and passive art and its imposing and rigid form. And that's very much Earth, right? Planet Earth. But while within the spaces, the spirit models the fluidic material at will, gives it the appearance, hues, outlines as it wishes on our planet, matter opposes more resistance to the human will. The stone block resists the sculptor's chisel and the mason's tool. Sometimes it takes long and patient efforts and persistent toil for the expression of beauty in marble and granite. Whereas with music, it's fluidic. Constantly within split seconds, it's changing. The expression is different. And here in architecture, it's slow and hard. While on Earth, now within architecture, he picks the cathedral, which is very beautiful. While on Earth, the cathedral, taken as an architectural type, is the result of patient and lasting work by a working collectivity, from the humble stonesman to the great artist who drew up the overall plans. Conversely, on the spiritual plane, it is the particular work of a master that instantly and at will can build or destroy a cathedral, assisted only by a group of students who seek to assimilate and imitate their master's creative thinking. It's beautiful, isn't it? Something to look forward to. In the meantime, we're going to work with the dense matter, right? It's part of the course. Here below on Earth, the monument is the work of a human crowd, the labor of centuries, right? If we think of the European cathedrals, it took hundreds of years to build them. Hundreds of years. For generations, artists and workmen have worked together to raise these columns, he's talking about cathedrals, spires and towers, melting and molding these windows, painting these images, and carving these statues. Thus, the pyramids, the palaces, the cathedrals were slowly gaining form. That is why in their majestic unity, they symbolize the spirit of a people, the genius of a race, the soul of a religion. It's beautiful, isn't it? It is faith, enthusiasm, and ardent spirituality that have raised these veritable Bibles of stone, he calls the cathedrals. Very poetic, isn't it gorgeous? That's an expression of art, right? As an example. And in these colossal works, the unseen have their role, because we're always, all good things come from God, right? Every artist works together with spirits, always being inspired. Okay, let us move on. So that gives us more to play with. The earthly cathedral, Leon Denis said, serves as a framework for all the arts. It's a framework for all the arts. It's one of the highest expressions in architecture are those churches, those cathedrals. The essential role of art is to express life in all its power through grace and beauty. Yet life is movement. And this is key now. I hope you're listening. So here we have the cathedrals, rigid, took centuries to build. And yes, they are pieces of art and expressing divinity. But life is movement. They're rigid, right? They're sitting there, boom, with all of architecture, paintings too. Life is movement, and it is precisely in this that lies the main difficulty of human art, which can reproduce movement only through what? Music. And that's why Leon Denis says that music is the highest form of art on planet Earth. Because it's true, life is movement. We're constantly, the body, just our physical form, nature, everything is in movement continuously. And music gets the closest to that. He says the other arts can only give the illusion of art here on planet Earth. Music. This is not what happens to the works of art built on the spiritual plane. Everything is life, movement, color, and light. So there, the category of music being the highest form is not necessarily true, because everything is movement, right? Fluids. All we need to do is think, and everything becomes animated and alive. In the spirit plane, the columns will have of a church, of a cathedral, will have the suppleness and the elasticity of the most subtle matter. Its walls will be translucent as crystal, and 1,000 hues unknown on earth will play in shifting networks of shadow and light. All harmonies are combined in waves of inexpressible sweetness. And everything vibrates with the thrill of intense and deep life. So this is a fluidic cathedral, for example, in contrast. So we're going to close preliminarily until we do the real closing with the following sentence. And there's so much more. I'm telling you, this book is fascinating because obviously there's so much more. This is just like not even a tip of an iceberg to kind of spark our interest in diving deeper and understanding art and its importance, the beauty, the striving for God in a deeper way. So he finishes off chapter 1 by saying, art enhances itself and progresses at every single step of life's ladder, accomplishing ever more noble and perfect forms as it draws closer to the divine source of eternal beauty. So what he's really telling us is our inner transformational work that is at the core of our work in each and every incarnation. And of course, also on the spirit when we're in spirit form, is the key for us to perfect ourselves and also to draw closer to beauty and to get closer to God. So art is an integral part of that. And here on planet Earth, music is at the core of its most divine expression of art. Why? Because it's the only fluidic form. So any questions before I'm going to play a piece of music? I'm going to get out.
Shine, it's Kiki here. I do have a question.
Yeah.
Does he say anything about dance? Because I know that like music has a lot to do with I love that when you said about perception and expression. I feel like this is so important because sometimes you can perceive something but you cannot express, and sometimes you can express but you cannot perceive. So I feel like this balance is really, really exciting. And then like how dance plays, and I don't know if he explains about it, but how dance plays a role in this art movement.
Yeah, he does not, he does talk about the different forms, also poetry, which is more fluidic than architecture. Again, this first chapter is titled Architecture and Arts, right? So he starts off with the densest form. There's many gradations. He just keeps going back to the fact that music is because, if you think about dance, it's still more dense, not dance, but dense. It's, slower than music. Music is like the formation, right? So, but yes, he does talk about the different things later on in the book. Yes.
May I interject here? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because art, on the spiritist perspective, is definitely a talent as any other talent that is evolving. Consider that Leon Denis wrote these words based on his perspective of the 19th century. So that was not really evidence of different type of arts like dance and all of that. But art as a talent develops. If I pick a form of art, for example, if I am a speaker, if I am a physicist, if I am a doctor, a medical doctor, if I am a dentist, those are form of arts, and I can get better and better at it as I progress. And I have the option to, in every incarnation, to continue to develop that talent. So to the point where we get to the level of a genius, because I have mastered so much of that talent that I now can consider to create art. That's what equivalent to what a PhD represents in our educational system. Is someone that is producing knowledge, and it goes beyond to like Einstein. He was a genius in physics, in mathematics. So that's a talent. So dance can definitely qualify as an art, and we can all evolve in that direction. So to me, art is very encompassing, and nowadays we have so much stuff that goes on that I believe it was. What's that Indian guy? Gandhi. Gandhi said in his life that the human being is the center of a circumference without limit, meaning that we can evolve in every direction that we wish to its maximum, to actually to become a perfect circumference of a magnitude that is enormous, is universal, like the divine spirit. I don't know if you can follow this, but it's amazing that we can all spin in every direction. So that's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you, Charles. And you're right. I mean, the book has its limitations in the sense that Leon Denis is a human and he has his limitations. What I find interesting, though, and helpful is that he uses different spirits, to support his ideas. And he has Massenet, who is a French composer, who came back and helped write this book and gives more information. And that's why, again, this is not even the tip of an iceberg, but the theme kind of continues through it. And Massenet explains a lot about music in this.
Yeah, I'll bring it to your attention, for example, the healing arts of somebody that has the ability to heal. It's a healing art that can expand it. We have so many demonstrations of that amongst us, especially with the new crop of spirits that are coming in from different orbits of the universe that are coming to assist us on this evolutionary path now. So it is amazing. It's yeah, and remember this that when Allan Kardec asked the spirits if he was actually capable of conducting his mission, the spirit said, "Well, don't worry, because if you cannot do that, somebody else will." And Leon Denis was one of those. So Leon Denis is, in comparison, like a second Allan Kardec. So his teachings are impregnated of elevated teachings that is amazing. And there are more.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Charles. Yes.
I think this was fascinating because I had got a little snippet of um, PBX doing a special on Da Vinci, and he was amazing. I had no idea the artistic abilities of him, how he was into medicine, and he accomplished so much. So this it's in line with what you're saying. Even music, he was into everything. It was just fascinating to me. I didn't know he did so much. He accomplished so much. And he did have an eye for beauty.
Yeah, a genius, a true genius. And apparently also medium he was channeling, you know. Yeah. Any other?
Amazing, Sunshine. Thank you. Wow,
Yeah.
beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah, I find it fascinating myself. So I was going to play, it's a 4-minute piece of music. It's a waltz. It's played by, let me share it here, by Hauser. He's a young man from, I think, Slovenia or something like that, Eastern country. And I find him, when I observe him, I mean, you can literally see how inspired he is. You know, he's working with spirits. He's like living the music. It's a waltz. The waltz goes back to the 13th century in the Germanic culture. And at the time when the waltz took over in Vienna, I think it was the 17th century, it was a riot. It was like rock and roll. It was like, oh my God, what's happening to our world? So it's kind of cute to look back sometimes, because we get outraged of new music and new things happening these days, right? But then let's think about that the waltz was like shocking. So I'm gonna play that, and I invite you to really feel it, to maybe close the eyes or even watch him, because you see the orchestra, you see really, yeah, to see it from the angle of music, right? So let's see, it's only 4 minutes long.
Excellent.
It's really, you can feel how the mood is created, how it touches us, right? And the more we open, it gave me chills. It's like, of course, the waltz is deeply embedded in my cultural heritage. So it really,
Yeah.
thank
I
you.
enjoy seeing the artists flirting with the girls in the audience. That was funny.
Yeah. He has a
So anything that elevates people's emotions, right? There are so many art piece, music pieces that brings people to a level of even crying because of the emotion. So does the dance. When you see somebody with a beautiful dance piece, it elevates to the point that you cry, or an actor, and so on, right?
Yes. And also the hertz, right? I mean, there's more and more studies now done to go to the 432 hertz, and there's a 520 something hertz too, which actually is more sparkly. It raises our sentiments even higher, connects us with God deeper, because for several hundred years we've been a little bit suppressed by music too. So it's something to pay attention to as well. How
Yeah,
that
420 are very popular nowadays.
Yeah. And if we tune in, we hear the difference, what it induces and instills in us. Anyway, thank you guys. Thank you so much.
Wow, what a treat. I am so happy just feeling the music. And I love dancing, Kiki. Kiki and I like doing Zumba. And dance just give you an opportunity. In our case, we play our Brazilian songs, our tropical, just to kind of take us to back to Brazil, and that link, because that's the memories that we make that connection with. And you're right, if you want to change your vibration, if you're not feeling good, that's what they say, turn on the radio, play a music that you enjoy, start doing some dance, some helping with the physiology of the body to create those feelings, né? And Sunshine, thank you so much for sharing with us this beautiful piece of music, but also the information by Leon Denis. And it's just a beautiful way to look at life, and the merging of the art and the culture and the spiritism. It's magical. So I felt that was a beautiful
May I,
speech.
I'm
Go
sorry, Adriana. I gotta bring this because I'm being intuited to do this.
Please.
How many of you are you aware of the works of Luis Gasparetto? Yes. Luis Gasparetto is a medium artist. He passed away recently, and he would give throughout the world live demonstrations of art by painting. He would paint with both hands in a dark environment. They turn off the lights, they put a bag of paint for him in front of him, and with his hands, with his feet, he would paint this amazing work of art. But through his experience, there is a very important lesson he brought to us, to pay attention to the responsibility of their arts. So in any field that we develop that talent, there is a higher degree of responsibility for the message that we are sending out. So one quick example, at some point he would start drawing some very sensual pictures of women naked and all that, and the spirits called his attention to say, look, pay attention, because that image can affect others in a way that you cannot imagine. So you bear the responsibility of being conscious about what you bring into the world. So that applies for any field of arts. If I am a mathematician and I bring the calculation for a devastating bomb, I'm responsible for that. And vice versa, can bring a cure for a virus because of that talent. So that's all. I'm sorry.
Good point. Good point. I feel like, especially in Brazil, when there can be more sensual dances, choreographies, I think it's a good point for us to be mindful of what is the message, because through art we can express so much. So I appreciate that point being raised. Thank you, Charles. Okay, my friends. We are going to take a 5-minute break. Keep the vibration with you during the break, because right now I'm just feeling so happy and I can see you all being so vibrant. So it is now 10:54. Oh, 10:55 now. Okay, so at 11 sharp, we are coming back for the second part of our Brazilian spiritual healing circle. Thank you so much. I'll see you in 5 minutes.